gentlemen, welcome to another edition of American Scouser TV. This is Gally, and I am going to be hosting tonight. I am brought to you with Bickler. Bickler, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right, man. You're doing great. Good job.
So you know how it rolls. We're rolling on through this thing. We are basically without the boss, and he is on vacation. We let him go to California every couple times a year. He sends himself out. Sir Z says hello. Uh, Good evening, gents. Brian Shelton is also in with a good evening, and Nick is jumping in with a hi. And hi to you too, Nick. We got a lot to talk about tonight between the match, some transfer news. Nick wants to talk about Chiesa, and we are going to get to Chiesa, Nick. I promise. The Italian in me will make sure we talk about the chance of us signing an Italian. But instead, we will start with talking about the signing of a player I can't pronounce his last name. So we'll just call him Georgie. I feel like Georgie the Georgian makes the most sense for this podcast tonight, Paul. Where do you roll when it comes to not signing a player all summer and then signing a keeper for 3 years from now?
I think that we would universally love this signing if we had made signings this summer, right? I think
100%.
And that's kind of the genius of this and just in general, because I think in a few years, this has the obviously there's more money involved and there's more stuff on the table, but I think this has the ability to look like an Andy Robertson type signing in a few years, with the fact that he legitimately has a shot, I think by 26, 27, to be in the conversation for best goalkeeper in the world.
Yeah, the guy has immense talent. Anyone who watched the Euros saw the performances he put in for Georgia. They were outstanding. He has all the talents in the world. Now, he does look a little bit prone to a mistake at the back when it comes to playing the ball with his feet, which in this new world we're in,
that's what happened
a little weird.
7, though, you know.
But they all work into this. They all have to work through that, and it's a maturation process. I love the fact that we made a proactive move to sign a player, and I just find it funny when you read the hate about it, where people are angry that we signed a player for a position of strength, but then they're mad that we don't have a replacement for either Virgil or Mo as they might leave the club. So to me, I feel like it's just a really, really great piece of business. Matus jumps in, one of the smartest pieces of business, 6'6" frame with great athleticism. Just a little work needs to be done with his feet. I think it's absolutely true. If you look at his stats as they match up against other elite goalkeepers in the world, statistically, he is like off the charts. He's like Donnarumma at a different level, which is almost scary seeing that the whole world wanted to sign Donnarumma.
I was just going to say the irony is that was Matusha's scouting report right when he joined the American Scouser. You know, like it's the same thing. Like, yeah, I think he's going to be good. I mean, yeah, I love the fact that he does have this like Donnarumma like frame, right? I mean, anytime you get a big imposing goalkeeper, it's a little bit old school like that. So yeah, that is going to be the thing though. Like his distribution out of the back is gonna be the big sort of sticking developmental piece there.
And listen, this is a legitimate concern from Brian Shelton. You know, I still want priority contracts signed, but it's good business. I don't disagree that there is work that still needs to be done, but I do think that they overall put themselves in a good position here to, at a minimum, have a legitimate replacement for Allison, allow you to sell Allison on for a fee if you decide to. If not, you could just stay with Allison, stay your course, have this guy go off on loan for a couple of years, have huge years, and you could still turn around and sell him for a massive fee eventually. If for some reason you end up not needing him to be the number one at Liverpool someday, and I'm not saying I think that will be the case, you're going to profit off the amount of money you just paid for arguably the best keeper under the age of 25 in the entire world. So to me, this is a no-brainer. This is a classic Edwards move, and I know that is not what anyone wants to hear in a summer of no other moves. So let's take a look here. Well, first, before we go, Sir Z says he agrees with Brian. I would take the contracts above new signings right now. I'll just say I'm going to just jump out right now. That's ludicrous to me. You don't if you want to talk about Trent's contract, that's fine. You don't talk about contracts of 30-plus-year-old players rather than players who might play for your club for 10 plus years as smarter signings, in my opinion. Because at best, if Mo or Virgil resigns, you have 2 to 3 top years at high level with them left. So to me, I actually think we should be more angry about not signing young players to build the future of this club than we should be frustrated about not re-signing 30-plus-year-old veterans, even if they've had blinders of performances in their first couple matches. Where do you roll on re-signing current players compared to buying new talent to build the club forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think if you see these things, you're seeing short-term extensions anyway, right? I mean, nobody's going out there and getting a monster 4 or 5 year deal here. And I think we all know that, right? I just think that people are so married to these guys that we've fallen in love with and seen raise titles over the years that I think that's why Shelton's over there wringing his hands over the smoker. I mean, I think that's why, like, you know, Sir Z's nervous from his comfy chair. I think, like, I think we've got, at this point, we're so married emotionally to these players. I think that's why you're seeing this. And I think a lot of times the logistics of how old they are and what the statistics say happen to performance, I think sometimes getting written out of the equation for us when we think like that.
So some rumors that have come out, some players that have become available, some things that have hit the interwebs. I believe they're probably all BS. But let's start with the one where it came in. Our first comment of the day was Chiesa, talk Chiesa. We've had a lot of rumbles today. Obviously, people knew this player was available. Thiago Motta made it very clear he was not part of his plans. Juventus made it clear he would be available. I think the player also kind of made it clear he would prefer to go to Barcelona. Well, so would a lot of people. It's warm, it's sunny. They have great tax laws, and they pay an awful lot for players and then pay them to leave. But, like, let's be real, they can't afford him. So I think everybody knows that Barcelona is probably not a legitimate offer. So, Paul, where do you roll on the Chiesa rumblings? I understand he's had injury issues, but he did make 33 appearances last year, played well, and he's an Italian international that a lot of us remember lighting up World Cups and Euros. Like, would this be a player you would take a $15 million flyer on?
I mean, this is a player that we were talking about spending like ridiculous, absurd sums
$100 million
after the Euro.
100.
Yeah, after the Euro performance. You're telling me
he's going to replace Mo then?
Right. If you're telling me we can get him for $50 million and have a rotational piece in this side that can be a replacement for Mo if something, God forbid, happens to him at any point, like, yeah, I'd snap your arm off if you were to put your hand out and offer me that. And I think anyone would be dumb not to. The injury stuff, he got the one bad injury, and that I think really tanked that. But the fact is he looked durable. He had a lot of starts last year, you know. I think the one thing that you can raise the concern of is can he handle the physical pace of play of the Premier League? His international career suggests he can.
Yeah, I would agree. I know Sir Z says for $15 million, it reminds me of a Shaqiri signing. Excellent piece of business. I'd argue in some ways it's better than a Shaqiri signing because when you signed Shaqiri, you thought you were getting a guy off a relegated side who might be able to give you some, like a nice depth piece or do something fun. And then he had some great moments.
I feel like Shaqiri's ceiling was Keyes' floor. Like, you know
yeah,
what I mean?
Well, that's where I kind of think, like, I think where, like, Chiesa could still come here, and he's not even at his prime yet. He could still turn this into, like, his prime years at Liverpool and could give you what, you know, they really believe they were getting. And I will say this, the last time Liverpool signed a winger that was prolific at Fiorentina.
Oh, no.
Turned out pretty well, people. So I'm going to say this. I think that signing Chiesa would be absolute brilliant business. And I think a Chiesa signing is one of those like sneaky pieces of business where if they did Chiesa and a small piece, either in the midfield or defense, and then you have this monster keeper, you start talking to yourself like, wait, we held on to Gomez, we signed Chiesa, and we brought it like before you know it, it turns into like a really, really solid window. And in classic fashion, we've been, Chicken Little with the sky is falling the entire time. So another interesting rumor that came out was that Pep Guardiola had approved selling Matthias Nunez to Liverpool. I would approve selling a piece of shit I don't want to a club that almost bought said piece of shit before other piece of shit bought piece of shit. One, do you believe one iota that Manchester City would let him come to Liverpool? Two, do you think there's any chance Edward would be dumb enough to pay that kind of money for Matthias Nunez?
So I think Pep would sell him to us. I don't think we would buy him, and I don't think we're looking to have a second conversation about this player with a new manager, right? Like, I think we went through this with Jurgen to some extent. I just don't think they're going to turn around and try to get this in the door with a new manager as well, especially not at that fee.
Well, I almost just felt like in comic fashion, like it felt like we almost convinced them to make a bid before. Do you think they'd be dumb enough? And I think to myself, like, the guy is only a year older, proven himself to be even less equitable at the top level of this league. And you think people who value young players in the transfer market and resale value are going to make a move for this player? Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. So obviously the third picture on this screen was one that came up today out of nowhere. West Ham has basically let the whole Premier League know that James Ward-Prowse is available. They are not interested. Lopetegui has no interest in him. Southampton, obviously, as you can imagine, is interested in retaining his services. Forest supposedly is interested. I ask you, Paul Bickler, if I gave you James Ward-Prowse on loan this season at Liverpool to basically back up all three of Arne Slot's midfield spots, give you something different on set pieces, and maybe one of the best guys in possession the Premier League seen in 8 to 10 years, would you take a flyer on that guy helping your team or no?
I feel like people are toying with my emotions today because they know how much I love James Ward-Prowse. And here's what I think. I don't think he's an ideal fit for this midfield system in terms of what it does. Do I love him still? Yes. Rich Kramer down in Louisiana made it personal when he said he's basically Harry Wilson. I think the only similar.
He actually was talking about Chiesa, just didn't realize he was responding.
I thought he was talking about I think he was talking about James Ward-Prowse because they think he was saying he brought in the free kick conversation. And he was saying that like essentially all they're good at. They're one-dimensional players. They're good at free kicks.
Oh, I took it as it was just a slow white guy out on the wing, and therefore that was where Chiesa was.
I see, and I'll tell Brian this. I completely disagree. I think James Ward-Prowse is one of the most best all around midfielders, like all around, as in like you could probably play him in the 6 if you wanted to. He can play an 8, and he can play an attacking mid position. I think he can play all over the board. I don't think he's as good in tight spaces in possession, which is what this side needs. But I think he's a dominant midfielder in terms of an all-arounder, and I think he does everything above average, right? Free kicks are probably spectacular. But I don't think he makes sense in terms of the system. I don't think he would want to come do this like for a 1-year, 2-year project. I just don't see him wanting to do that. As much as I love the player, I can't see it making sense.
And I'm not advocating for the player. My point is everybody wants a signing, and everyone says we don't have enough depth, especially in that midfield ranks. But at some point, we're going to have to actually make a concession because it doesn't appear to me like they're about to go find the next Zubamendi for them. And we keep being recognized for these players leaving the club And we're going to talk about a few of those additional players that may stick around. Excuse me, that may stick around. I just think what it comes down to is we say he may not want to do this at the club. He may not want to sign on. You might be right. He may not want to be a bench player at this point of his career. But we can't sign any players that want to be starters because they're not going to start here right now.
Well, and Ward-Prowse gives you a lot of what you lost in James Milner, like from a work rate, a training, and a professional, like all those kind of intangible things that you need in a locker room and for the development of your younger players, whether it's Harvey or Jones. Like, he brings a lot of that too.
It's just more along the lines of, if you need adult bodies who understand the Premier League, how to play, and know what it's like to play, at Everton in a derby or play in a big match on the road, you'd be hard pressed to find a guy to give you 15 minutes off the bench and support you. And if you don't believe that Endo is that guy for you, then you really do need another body, because you're really right now rolling with Szoboszlai, Harvey, Jones, McAllister, Gravenberch.
Yeah, you're rolling with five. You're rolling with five, and one of them's injured.
Right. And Jones is always Jones and can continuously come up injured, and we don't know how Gravenberch will respond. To me, I know we could say, oh, you can drop Gakpo into the 10, you can play Jota in the 10, but now we're weakening the front five that we're talking about still needing another player in. So to me, I think there is the need for a midfielder if we're not going to keep one of the young midfielders, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But we've talked about a little bit of the incoming with the keeper and some of the rumors. Let's talk about the outgoings this week. Sepp van den Berg has secured a permanent move to Brentford, $25 million. Believe there's a sell-on clause as well, $5 million add-ons. Funny, the player didn't think he was worth $15
Yeah.
The player didn't think I like how the player didn't think he was worth it, but went to the place that offered the most money.
Yeah.
Because that's also that gave him the most bonus. Good business, bad business. Happy to see him go, disappointed. Where is Paul Bickler lie? I know you were a fan of the talent.
I was.
But also a realist.
I'm disappointed. I wanted to see him fight for a spot in the team. I thought he was really good. I think the thing about Sepp is he's exceptional with the ball at his feet. And I think that he's every bit as good as any of the ball playing center backs that are on that team right now. I did think obviously he has some developing to do, but I would have loved to see him stay and fight for it. But he wants to go play and have a better shot at starting football. He thinks that's elsewhere. I mean, obviously didn't love the comments that came out this summer, which indicate to me maybe that he has some maturing to do, and maybe that just didn't vibe well at the club either.
Yeah, I kind of felt like the club might have gave up on him right about the same time he gave up on the club. I think the fact that he didn't go to the podium and be like, what? I would have liked him to go up and be like, what? They only think I'm worth $20 million? What? I think I should be starting at Bayern. What are you talking about? I didn't love they've made my valuation so high, I'm not worth that. It almost made me be like, who are you? Where do you think you are? And then wanted to then kind of talk out of the side of his mouth and talk about wanting to actually.
Well, it sounds like a player who's afraid that the worst case scenario would be that he doesn't get a move. What club ever wants that guy?
Yeah, and I think Brian Shelton is right. I think he didn't want to accept his role in the squad. And I think that's the number one thing. I think he knew he wasn't going to play on the right side of that center back pairing. And he also knew he wasn't going to start over Virgil van Dijk. And I think he said, you know what? I can't do another year of cup games and squad matches and occasional Champions League games that don't mean anything. I need to go play football. I hope he gets minutes at Brentford. But I've seen a lot of guys make these lateral moves in the Premier League and then not get minutes. I almost think it would have been smarter for him to go back to Germany where he proved himself a starter. Because I look at that Brentford team we played this weekend, and I don't know he slots right into their starting back three.
Yeah.
And they still have Ben Mee on the bench getting fit, who is, I think, their club captain. So, like,
he starts. He is instantly back into that lineup.
I'm not sure that he's going to get that much more minutes. Well, speaking of a player who is very, very much interested in minutes, there are still these reports of Bajcetic going out on loan as more likely than not by Friday's end of the transfer window. Paul, let's take the injury aside, what we can get out of him this year. If Liverpool are not able to secure another senior level midfielder, are you comfortable at gambling on this season's squad by sending this kid out on loan for his betterment and future, which I think we all agree it would be beneficial for him to go get senior minutes starting right away? My argument is, could you hold out till January to see if you need them and let them slowly bet in and get fitness up and then loan them out in January if you don't need them for the second half of the season? Like, am I putting too much eggs in his basket, or am I?
No, I mean, I think you've seen us just hit injury crises multiple times when we've already been thin at positions. So I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, I don't love that. I mean, we just did the maths, right? We just talked about how we have a heavy 5 that we rotate with, and one of them's injured, so we're really down to 4. And then no 6, right? If we're not playing Endo, if Endo's not factoring in, like, this is tough because what you're saying is that you wouldn't start him over Endo. That's what this tells me, right? If that's what they're looking at. Which is just kind of hard to wrap your head around. If you're really thinking that Endo is not going to play a whole lot of minutes and you think the kid is going to play over him, I don't know. I'm with you. I think that I would wait and see what happens here. I would if he's going to get back up to fitness and you're going to do that, I'd much rather him do it at home than abroad. So I think it makes sense to wait a window and see what happens. And plus, you never know what – I mean, this is a club that routinely does good business in January, so you never know there.
Sir Z says, makes no sense in letting Bajcetic go when potentially 65 games to play this season. Man, I love this man's confidence. I love the idea that Sir Z's got us playing 65 games this year. That is outstanding. And I know there's a lot more Champions League matches, but 65 games is almost competing to the finals of all 4 competitions, which is why we absolutely love Sir Z. Matu says, Bajcetic is worse with the ball than Endo at this point, in my opinion. Keep him until January, though. I don't know if I agree that he's worse or better because I think I have to see it in this system and what he's being asked to do. I think at times under Klopp, he was asked to do different things. It would be interesting. I just question whether or not the manager rates Endo enough. I know he put him out there a little bit at the end of last game. It feels like there's a little bit of smoke. There's fire. He seems like he's fallen down the pecking order. I do think they tried to buy a couple different players, and I think if the right offer came in for Endo, they might consider it with his age and the ability of only having 1 or 2 chances to sell him on. But to me, this all comes back to another part, I wanted to ask you about, Paul. So before we start talking about the Brentford match, and we'll get there in a moment, there's been a lot of talk about the youth, right? And like Klopp's kids and how they're kind of being thrown out, right? They're kind of being like thrown out with the bathwater, kind of baby with the bathwater type of mentality. They've been sold, they've been loaned. Is this that the club didn't see them as the type of player they were, or more or less that the squad was so frail last year at times with all the injuries they had? We had no choice but to play these players, and it almost created value for them that these smart, I hate to say it, as some in our Discord channel would call them, the geeks behind the spreadsheets, realized we're never going to get better business than we are right now for these young players who have had so little exposure, but people think are great?
I mean, I think it's both. I think they played because we were thin last year, but I also think that the academy sort of ballooned and we didn't do a lot of outgoing business the way that we had typically been doing it back when we were selling the Brad Smiths and the Jordan Ives and the Harry Wilsons and all those players. Routinely we were getting decent transfer fees for them, and I think that business stopped for a few years. So I think there was a little bit of spring cleaning that needed to happen. And I also, we talked about this. I think a lot of times we get married to the idea of the next guy up, and when we see them in the first team, we think that that's an indication that these players are ready to arrive. And I think a lot of times we see the latter. I think we see these kids come in and do well for a short period of time, and then there's a little bit of regression to the mean where they really kind of are. And I think a lot of times that mean is a lot further from from that starting 11 than we really think.
And I guess that's where I wanted to ask you this question, because I was taken back a little bit earlier this week when I was reading up on some of the incomings and outgoings and some of the squad maturation stuff, that Kai Gordon and Ben Doak have been exclusively training with the U21s since they returned from America. So ultimately, they are not in the senior squad at this point. So, Unslot doesn't believe that Ben Doak is a senior Liverpool player. And I guess what jumped out at me was one Trainioni is training every single day with the senior squad. So he has clearly made a big jump ahead of these players and is actually in the manager's mindset for taking up minutes and opportunities as the season goes on. But more importantly, that through all of this exodus, Tyler Morton is still there training every day, shaped like me. He's probably bigger now. I mean, it was 3 years ago at that point. So now he's like a 14 and a half year old. But Tyler Morton is still there every day training with the senior squad. And by all accounts, he's actually getting positive reviews from the manager when he talks about the players. Is there maybe a chance that when all the dust settles, Tyler Morton ends up being the 5th or 6th or the last midfield option? Why is he training with that?
Can you imagine?
What is it that the manager sees about him? But I mean, he was Hull City's player of the year last year. There has to be a reason that Leipzig tried to sign him. There's rumors today that Bayer Leverkusen are trying to sign him on a permanent transfer. I don't know. If Javi wants him, I might question maybe we should think about keeping him.
Yeah, there's clearly something behind the scenes that we don't see, right? If he stays and Bajcetic goes, that would be kind of a wild story, right? I mean, that would definitely be a wrinkle that most of us did not see coming. But there's clearly something he's doing right that we haven't seen, just because, I think even the last time we saw him in the side playing, he just looked physically overmatched. So, and overrun at times. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here.
Yeah, it was just one that jumped out at me. I wanted to ask your opinion. Just that whole thing with Gordon and Doak not training at all. And those were guys and I think this is what happens when you switch managers, right? Eventually things that you see, Klopp saw things in Kai Gordon. He thought he was going to be a big, big talent. And I think this guy came in and was yeah, not so much.
I do think that I think that their disadvantage for a player like Gordon and Doak, I think the disadvantage is where they're trying to break into the squad. I think there's a reason why you see these kids break in as fullbacks, right? Or even as midfield rotational pieces. I think it's really hard at this level to crack into a starting 11 as an outside attacker. I think it's super, super. And I think the reason, I legitimately think the ones that you do see break through are just super rare cases, like the Raheem Sterlings, Saka, who started at fullback, right? I think I think it's just so rare that you see these players. The Garnachos, I think, are just very, very extremely rare.
Brian Shelton feels both should go out on loan. John Santos says, I'd like him to go to Wolves under Gary O'Neill. I'm assuming he might be talking about Morton just because we were talking about him for a while. I just find it hard to believe that we can be talking about sending any midfield player out on loan if we're not buying another midfielder at this point. We have 5 or 6 midfielders without taking attackers in, and I just don't think Morton or Bajcetic can really leave unless additions are coming in, and I'm not sure that we're going to see any of those additions. So let's migrate over here. Let's transfer into the Brentford match on the weekend. So Sunday morning comes around. This lineup drops in front of you. Paul Bickler says, I knew it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did say. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, this is, I think, the most predictable starting 11 we've had in probably 9 years.
So with that predictable starting lineup, do you anticipate, were you anticipating that they would come out the blocks firing, that they would be slow and steady to move into this match? Like, how do you feel this match unfolded from the get-go? Because I know we've been questioning of how this team would start matches.
Yeah, I just felt that we would start pretty conservatively. I mean, that seems to be sort of the modus operandi with Slot. I mean, everybody talked about this attacking mastermind. And the thing I think I said when we first looked at it is like, I think if anything, we're going to improve defensively. And I think a lot of that is just because he's so conservative in the mindset. I think there is some like attacking principles that are really nice inside the system. But I think the impetus is on ball retention and safe spaces, right? And I think if you look at the side, I thought the thing that stood out to me yesterday is in the first 20 minutes, how sharp those guys were. And from a passing standpoint, I know we'll talk about it later. They finished with the highest passing percentage ratio, like in 24 years or something like that. I mean, this is the first manager that's won his first 2 matches for Liverpool in 33 years, right? So there's a lot a positive here. I just thought across the board, I thought the play, especially, I mean, I think Brentford had about a 15, 20-minute run there in the first half where they kind of started to get some momentum back and pegged us back a little bit. But I thought for the most part, the passing was so crisp across the board. It was just really, really different to watch because of the pace. The pace is not as frenetic, right, and not as exciting. But I thought, if you really love football and you really enjoy the tactical side of football, I think it's a really, really fun system to watch.
You mentioned it. Let's go there. I think the announcers were trying to goad us there. Social media was trying to get people there. There was talks about Anfield being quiet and it being church-like, and it was too passive. So what say you, Paul Bickler, one day after a nice home victory? Do you think that Anfield needs to recognize this is a new way of going about things? Do you think, I personally am one who feels like if the crowd was needed yesterday, they would have been there to raise up and give them an Anfield moment if it was needed. But I don't think it was needed, and I don't think the play on the pitch gave them a moment to get overly loud or get, Anfield night-like we talk about European nights at Anfield. I don't worry that Arne's ball will put Anfield to sleep and turn it into the Etihad, which I did read in a Liverpool newspaper today, by the way. But I guess my question to you is do the supporters in the crowd need to recognize that it is going to be different? And sometimes they're going to have to create their own energy if they feel like it's needed, because the play on the pitch isn't going to be as frenetic and frantic as we've witnessed for the last 9 years.
Yeah, I think there were periods where it was too quiet just in general anyway, regardless of the play, right? So I think Anfield, can be better. In general, I think a lot of it was sort of just this trumped up talking point throughout it, right? Like I felt like they kept bringing it up because there just wasn't a whole lot else to really talk about. I think at the end of the day, I feel like we're going into week 3. Like, can we just close the Klopp chapter, right? Can we stop talking about all the questions post game to Virgil were about Jurgen Klopp and new manager this, new system that. I just felt like at some point the media is going to have to find other things to talk about. And I think the fact that Slot has gotten to the point where they don't have anything other than this is almost a testament to how well he's bedded in and made this side what they are already. because like, we're booking clean sheets week in and week out, winning 2-0, 2-0. Like it's almost a boring dominance in right now, which is kind of crazy. I mean, there's obviously still scary moments out of the back right now, but I think if you look at it, this side in 2 weeks has seemed to completely adapt and soak in a lot of the principles that were foreign, 3 months ago. So I think it's a testament to the manager. I also think it's a testament to these players. I think Anfield in general can do better. I think the supporters can do better. I think they can be louder. We're moving into this next chapter, but to me, like a lot of that stuff is just such a non-story.
Yeah, it did feel like it was more about something that was being talked about, but I thought it was something that was at least worth bringing up with you because it was brought up in the broadcast. We've heard it in the past, and it is going to be a different style. I mean, at times, the energy would come from the frenetic pace of the pitch, and he's actually asking them to play in a different manner. I mean, we're going to get to the end of the match in a bit, but let's hang in on that first half. Let's talk about that first goal. Obviously, Mo does a great job defending off of, he's strong off of the defense of the corner. He steals the ball down. He drops it to Jota. Jota takes 2 dribbles and releases that ball to Diaz. I mean, for me, it is counterattacking football at its finest. And it's Jota at its finest. I mean, the cheeky little pass, the perfect moment that he releases it, and then the weight on it. Now, I will say, I gave him all the credit when I first was pounding in Discord about how happy I was, probably because I was also doing victory laps for my fantasy team. But then when I actually watch it back and actually see the touch that Diaz takes out of full stride and keeps it in front of him, and the actual power on his weaker left foot that he gets that ball on net, it's actually a really smart finish and a really good job by Diaz. Like, how impressed are you in 2 matches of Luis Diaz? Because we spent all summer talking about how the team was better with Gakpo playing. And I'm still not going to say I'm wrong at that point, but I won't say that Gakpo should have been playing the last 2 matches because Diaz has been outstanding in these 2 first fixtures as far as what he's offering, and his link up with Jota has been really, really good.
I'm not as high on Diaz as you are right now. I do think I think the statistics are lying a little bit here. Not to say that wasn't a great goal, and I think it was even a better run. The decision to split the defenders there, and I think the timing of the pass was just incredible. To me, like the thing that I still have a tough time with Diaz is I still think that he's killing far too many attacks by the decision he makes on the ball, especially the sort of insistency to sort of drift in and just continually drift in without releasing anybody, right? Like I think I still think I want to see some improvement there, right? Like I still think that he certainly hasn't played himself out of this lineup. Am I saying that he shouldn't start next week? I'm not saying that, right? I think he's going to start this next week. I still think this side's best iteration is with Gakpo on the left there. But I think he's done enough here to continue to play into this. I just want to see him make better decisions on the ball, like in general. That's my main thing with Diaz.
I think there has to be something, though, to this manager. Like, it's not like the manager had all summer with him and didn't have summer with Gakpo. There's something the manager is seeing in it. To me, it looks like the manager is actually trying to funnel play through his side to actually create more for Mo. And to me, that makes me think the manager really has – I think the manager has come to grips with this is his best front 3. And maybe it's that he doesn't think Gakpo and Jota work well together, or when you have someone as kind of methodical as Gakpo on the left-hand side, it offshoots Mo's kind of speed and dynamicism on the right. There's got to be something, because to me, it does feel like the manager believes that Nunez and Gakpo work better than, say, Jota and Diaz, or Jota and Gakpo as an example. And the more I've seen it, it just feels to me like Diaz fits his kind of like kamikaze role. And the one thing about Diaz is he does work really, really hard on both sides of the ball.
Oh, sure.
And we know Gakpo has been criticized fairly
And I will say,
for his
like,
defensive work
we
rate.
put it in Discord. I thought he put like a Sadio Mane-esque performance in defensively this week. Like he was, he'll get it for the assist and the goal. I thought he was almost better defensively than he was offensively.
Oh, I don't disagree with that at all. And I think when we're also talking about Robertson and some of his deficiencies or things that he maybe is starting to show as cracks in the armor, maybe having a left wing that is dropping back and doing extra work to help you out is something that would be helpful. So speaking of the work, let's talk a little bit here about the midfield before we talk about Mo and his brilliance, because you can do that every week ad nauseum. Gravenberch again put in a pretty good performance. I thought he was a little better, in my opinion, in the first match. I thought there were a few times where he got a little lackadaisical on the ball. I thought there were a few times where he showed some of those frailties to his game that always make me worry about him. But again, he looks very, very calm and assured on the ball. And he looks like he's comfortable in the formation. Is this me just wishing we have a number 6, Paul, or am I seeing something here? Are we seeing the birth of the player we thought we were buying when we did?
I honestly think that Slot took him into the office, sat him down, and said, "Remember that player you were at Ajax? That's what we need. That's what we want." And I think Slot is sort of recaptured and brought him back to. I mean, he's asking him to do similar things that he did in Ajax, and I think so. For him, I think there's a familiarity. And I think he's gaining confidence and feeling more comfortable in his role because he's being asked to do things he knows how to do that he's already done well in his career, right? So he's just being asked to perform that on a higher level at a quicker pace in a more physical league. So I think that's the adjustment that we're seeing being made now. And I think it's almost kind of brilliant. Like you have a player that was an important player for this side that you went and got that was, one of Klopp's like Mount Rushmore midfielders that he really wanted. He got him in, and he basically just said, "Hey, like we're gonna take this player back to square one to what he's good at. Ask him to do those things and build around it." And I think it's been brilliant so far. I agree with you. I thought he was better week 1 than he was week 2, but I think and I don't think he's the 6 that we all want, right? I don't think he's that player. I don't think he does those things. He's not a destroyer. He's not gonna drop back in between the center backs and just clean up. But he's great going forward. He can hit it from deep lying positions. He's got a long ball in him. He can do all those things that you want from like sort of a visionary standpoint in a holding mid. And so I think that's what they'll build around. And it's great to see him sort of get comfortable again, right? Feels like a guy who's finding his feet, and I think that can only be good, especially if we're not buying a 6. I think this makes the most sense, and it's been great to see him sort of. I feel like his sort of confidence has been almost a little bit contagious right now. Like his confidence back there, his reassuredness, watching him grow, it seems to be sort of affecting a lot of those guys around him right now.
So Mo got the second goal. Obviously puts us up 2-0. Really at that point felt good about the match. Felt like, as we have this beautiful graphic that Lydia Page made for us, our full-time graphic, 2-0. Liverpool, good night the lights. Mo puts the cap around the match. Schlott starts to rotate, take players out. Obviously, we've all seen the Trent substitution and then the response on the sideline. I said this last year, right? I have no problem when players show their frustration when they're subbed off or don't like what's going on. I just don't like it when they won't answer it or acknowledge like it happened. Like when we all tried to pretend like what Mo Salah did to Klopp last year wasn't rude and offensive and stupid, right? Like just like this. Trent was irritated. Trent was pissed. Trent moped. and Trent walked off the pitch and wasn't happy about it and was moping on the bench. What I love is that the manager was like, I'm having none of this. I ain't waiting till later. Yep. He went right over, he sat down, he talked to him. Now, it wasn't like Trent was like, whoa, Skipper, I'm sorry, Gaffer, I didn't mean to. He was still a little like petulant and talked under his hand, but it looked like he understood, he listened, and then after the match, he was a little mopey, and there were some players who clearly knew they had to get him to realize what he was doing was stupid.
Yeah.
But I feel like he answered it well in social media. In my opinion, he put it out. Is this handbags and hand grenades, Paul? Or is there something more here because the manager 2 weeks in a row has subbed off a very big player who is also up for one of the biggest contracts the club's had on offer in the last 10 years?
I don't think there's a whole lot here. I think the fact of the matter is we know this. Trent is who we know him to be. And Trent, for all his great things, has a tendency to show his age at times, right? We know this about him. We've questioned his mental makeup before, right? So, like, is he Yep. I don't think he's as tough as we all want him to be mentally. So I think that what I love about the manager is, A, he's clearly communicating with the player, and B, he's holding the player responsible. He's holding the player accountable by going to him. And, like, I think Slot is smart enough to know that if I go to this player who's just been subbed off, who's upset, the camera now is not only just on this player, but it's on me communicating with this player. So, like, I have a moment where the player has to engage with me. He understands. He's drawn – like, you know, I think he's basically like, okay, if you're going to act like that and draw attention to yourself, I'm going to be involved too. And it's going to be a learning moment, right? Like, that's what I like about that, because it's holding him accountable and communicating. I think we're not talking about this if we're not talking about the contract situation. I think this is probably not as big of a story if the contract thing isn't out in the air. And I think at the end of the day, these players are going to have to realize one thing about this guy not being Jurgen Klopp. And that means that if you're going to play 60-plus games a season like Serzy thinks he is, the way that you're going to do it is you're going to do it healthy and not injured. And the way that you not get injured is you protect these players by pulling them. If it's Mo Salah coming off of 20 minutes to go in a game that you're up 2 goals, you blow a 2-goal lead because you sub Mo Salah out, you have bigger issues. That's where he's coming from. And that's what I love about this, because this is a side that's needed rotation for 8+ years, right? Like, this is a side that needs – and what do? You protect your biggest assets by monitoring their minutes. So if that – and the thing about Trent is, like, not only is this not smart from him, it's insanely selfish, because, like, A, you're having your minutes managed so you can play the entire season healthy, and B, you got a kid behind you that needs to develop like you had an opportunity to develop. Bradley needs to have minutes to develop if it's closing 20 minutes out of a game, whatever it may be. He needs to have the opportunities to be in this side and develop too. And that's what Trent needs to understand, is that, A, it is about him. It's about managing him and having him be sustainable, but it's also about the rest of the team too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sir Z said the optics were bad from Trent. Slot did good to squash it in front of the other subs and for the watching world. Matu says one of Slot's strengths coming in was his emotional intelligence and leadership. He knew what to do with Trent specifically. I completely agree as well. I think that what we've ended up seeing is that this is a man who manages completely differently, right? Like, Klopp was all about going for it. Go get the 3rd goal. You're up 2-0. Get the 3rd. Get the 4th. We do us. We don't dribble. Like, you ever remember watching Liverpool take the ball to the corner? Yeah. Really? To like try to win out a match? Yeah. Ever, right? Like, but this is going to happen now. You saw it, and there was a moment in like the 90th minute plus a couple where Harvey basically stole a ball just inside our own half. And there were like 2 minutes of extra time left. And he easily could have tried to launch a counterattack after he got the ball. And he could have went forward. He could have sent it to Nunez. Nunez would have tried to send it here, and we would have tried to get that 3rd goal and, like, let's get top of the table with City after 2 weeks. And Harvey paused, and you could almost see it. He looked forward, and then he took a deep breath, and he kicked the ball back to Kanate, and he almost dropped his shoulders. And he looked over at the manager, and Slot, I swear to God, Slot either like winked at him or gave him like a nod.
Mm-hmm.
Like the point was, kid, we're up 2-0.
Yeah.
This game's done. I made the subs to see this out. And like, I think we're going to see these types of moves all year long. Like, we've seen Mo Salah get subbed off 2 weeks in a row.
Right.
Like,
which we may have seen twice in 4 years. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and one of those times he literally threw such a fit, we almost had a fight on the touchline.
Yeah.
I mean, these are
that may be the biggest accomplishment so far.
Like, I honestly, I think these are like the watershed like moments, though. It's like the Kwanzaa move and then explaining why he did it. I listen to the Sirius XM every once in a while, and Rodney Marsh said a thing the other day, which was so right on. And he's like, as an ex-player, when you hear managers talk, he's like, it just sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah.
Every one of them. They just regurgitate things that are saying nothing, telling you nothing. He's like, this bloke at Liverpool gets asked a question, not only tells you how he feels, he explains why he feels that way. He's like, he answers everything that's asked to him. And he actually said, I bet it's refreshing as a supporter, but I bet it's even more refreshing as a player. Because when you question things, he's telling you what he sees. And, you know, we've already seen a little bit of it. I mean, we were all joking about him convincing Trent that he could bend a ball into the net from this crazy ass angle. And ever since, Trent has tried to score on every corner kick he's taken since. I'm convinced he is just like, I'm taking out. It doesn't even matter if the keeper's giving him the front post or not. He's like, manager said I can do it. Told me I can do it. So we've seen a real difference. I do believe that. I think we've seen a difference in their formation. I've seen a difference in how they set up. Are you at a point yet, Paul, where you believe that this team can make such a change with the squad that's currently constructed, that they can win major honors, or are there still a piece or two needed for this team to really challenge with Real Madrid in Europe, Manchester City domestically, Arsenal across the board, etc.?
I think they're 2 or 3 pieces away realistically from a depth standpoint. And I will add this caveat. I do not think that this side, I kind of agree with Brian. I think that the way that this side plays and the way that he manages those two things together with the rotation and the different pace of play, I think you're not going to see the amount of soft tissue issues and the amount of injuries that we have become accustomed to seeing with Liverpool. And I do think that is because this team is not playing at such a breakneck pace. And I think it's because the manager is insistent on getting the minutes to the point where they are rotating people out and not running the wheels off players.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And this is, Brian saying we're not going to go through the Klopp injury spells with Slot. I hope that's the case. Injuries are always a tough one. I don't like to blame them on the manager because you never know with the players and how they happen and when. And then you send a player away for 2 weeks on international duty and their manager runs him into the ground and he comes back and picks up a soft muscle tissue injury with you on the comeback. I will say I do agree with Kazi. If I were Slot right now, I'd be on the phone with whoever the current manager is for Argentina, just asking if he really needs to see Alexis McAllister again for these 2 worthless friendlies in the next 2 weeks. Like, you've won everything. You've won a Copa. You've won a World Cup. Can we just have this guy rest a little bit? I don't think it'll happen because in South America, they love to get their players back. They love to have them in camp. And let's be fair, if you asked Alexis McAllister if he wanted to go, he would tell you he wanted to go play on international duty with Argentina because they love playing for their country, and we always kind of put that back. So let me ask you this, Paul. As we prepare, me and you will be getting on planes on Friday to go to Chicago. As scary as that is for all the listeners, myself, Bickler, and Timuchin will be watching the United match together in a pub. Hopefully, if we can find one open that will house us. along with Timuchin, hopefully Gordo, Matouche, Michelle, Gordo's wife, Paul's girlfriend, my wife Kelly, Angie, uh, Idip, Timuchin's brother, his nephew. It sounds like we're going to have quite the crowd. We might even have Ryan joining us. So could be quite the event for Manchester United on Sunday when we are all in Chicago. What do you expect from that match? Do you expect rotation at all? Do you expect the exact same first 11 we saw starting against Brentford? What are your anticipations come 10 Central on Saturday?
I think, first of all, it's going to be an early morning because I have to get to Kasama to get their breakfast sandwich, and that line starts real early, and I got to do it in time to get to the game. Second of all, I think it's going to be the same lineup as last week. I think that he's going to have this core nucleus try to lock together and get some momentum with the core group of guys here. So I don't see any lineup changes. And oh God, these are always dicey. I think it's going to be, man, I'm going to go with the same score line. I'm going to go 2-0. Good guys. I'm going to go with it. I've seen nothing from Manchester United, which scares me, except for the fact that I don't like saying that out loud. So, but yeah, it seems like the same old United, and let's hope that we can have a better result than the last couple times we saw those guys.
Yeah, then the United thing to me is the only thing that gives me pause and trepidation is just that it is United, and you never know what can happen when you play them. We've seen it too many times before where we've gone there as this like heavy favorite, and normally when we go there the heavy favorite, we leave either the loser or the really disappointed one who drew a match we should have won. I think that in this instance, 2-0 would be the most perfect scoreline, because if you can get through 3 matches and still have like perfect goals, not giving up, conceding, you've beaten good teams. You know, people are like, oh, we're going to get a lot sterner test than Brentford. Brentford's not a bad football team, even without Ivan Toney. Let's not kid ourselves. Their best player was not dressed, but they were still a good outfit. They posed some problems. We caused them problems that didn't let them get into their play. They couldn't hit us on the counter all match long because every time it looked like they were going to counter, we had 5 guys back to their 2, which was, again, also very refreshing because it almost looked like guys had enough legs to get back on the few occasions they had to sprint back because they weren't sprinting all match long. So I think it's going to be exciting. I think we get the exact same lineup. I don't think there'll be any major changes. I do think we might see a little bit more of the attacking players. We may need a Gakpo or a Nunez to like put in a performance to get a result here, because who knows? This might not be one where, you know, we come out and score from our starters. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. I'm really excited for it. Obviously, I'm excited to see everybody in Chicago. For everyone here at American Scouser TV, thank you as always for watching. Please go out there, as Timuchin would say, hit all the good buttons, the thumbs up, the subscribe, the bell for the notifications, everything but the thumbs down. If you haven't already, make sure and subscribe or bring some friends to the channel. We would love to get you involved. We will have I believe we'll still have pre and post match shows this weekend. And of course, we'll have our Wednesday morning show and our Friday morning shows, as well as our Thursday night show, including the fantasy show. So Sir Z ends it up with, they can't sit back like they did against Klopp. They have to come and get the ball from us. And that might be the case, actually, when it comes down to it with United. To me, I just feel like United has set themselves up for a tough outing for the plain fact that, you know, he's going to basically roll De Ligt out there in his first ever start, and he has to do it at home against Liverpool, which is basically, I just feel like a guy just trying to set other people up to fail. But hey, if that failure is Manchester United's, I am all for it, and I am setting them up. So for all of us here at American Scouser, thanks for watching. Have a great week, and we will talk to you soon.